And it is that anticipated moment, Friday, at about 9:35, we connect with the Naked Scientist. Dr. Chris Smith is a consultant virologist at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, and he joins us live. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Clarence. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. And my question I filed first. I beat everybody to it.
Fastest fingers
So
first, that's what they say, isn't it?
it's a personal question, but I do spend a lot of time on the beach with my rescue dogs, and I'm wondering if they actually enjoy the view like I do, like we do, and the sunset like we do, or are they just indulging us? Are they just interested in the smells?
It's interesting you say that, isn't it? Because we spoke on previous programmes about consciousness and what consciousness is and whether animals are conscious, that kind of thing. We don't know, is the answer. We know that certain animals seem to enjoy play. Dogs certainly enjoy playing with each other, with us. But is that because they're interacting with us and that leads to food ultimately, and that's their goal? But you're right, it's a difficult one to ask. When they are out and about, they appear to be enjoying the environment, but are they really enjoying it, or are they just doing what a dog does? We don't know. They have brains which are very similar in structure. If you're a dog, many animals have brains very similar in structure to our own. They have all the same bits of the brain. They're just different parts of it are different sizes. And you tend to find that the size of a brain area corresponds to how important that brain area's function is to that particular animal's existence. So unsurprisingly, the smelling area in a dog's brain is absolutely huge. It's more than a third of their brain volume. In a human, the seeing area of our brain is more than a third of our brain volume. So unsurprisingly, we like looking at stuff. Dogs like smelling stuff. We get pleasure when we look at stuff. Dogs probably, therefore, get pleasure when they smell stuff, because the way that the brain encourages us to do things is that the areas that we use to do those things ultimately elicit a behaviour. That behaviour either has a good or a bad outcome. If it has a bad outcome, we learn not to do that again by having unpleasant sensations. If it has a good outcome, then we tend to want to do it again. And we tend to want to do it again because the outcome is connected to the brain's pleasure areas. So we get a little reward, a chemical hit of the substance dopamine, which we experience as pleasure and reward sensation, and that makes us do that behaviour more. So if you smell a nice dinner, you go and eat it, then you feel less hungry. You get a dopamine reward. Now, dogs going to do that too. When we see a person we love or we look upon a scene we like, we are enjoying that. So that must correspond to a boost of dopamine in our brain. So given that that's how our brains are doing it, and dogs behave in a similar way but with smells dominating, I would say they probably do enjoy going out and being assailed by all these wonderful smells that they can experience in dimensions that we can only dream of, because a dog's sense of smell is hugely powerful compared to our own. It's a bit like, for us, it's a bit like the difference between reaching into your pocket and feeling around in the coins and things in your pocket with your fingertips, and then doing the same thing with gloves on. That's the difference for our ability to smell compared to a dog's ability to smell. Dogs are definitely doing it with the gloves off.
Good morning, Clarence. Anthony's question came in at 9:14 this morning. If the naked scientists could tell me why African elements, both male and female, have tusks, the Indian elephant, only the male has. Any reason or why? Many thanks.
Well, lots of animal species have what we call sexual dimorphism. And dimorphism meaning two forms. And in other words, there's a male form and a female form. There are lots of species where the males and the females look different. Humans are similar to that. If you think about the mature female body shape and structure, it's quite different to what the males look like in terms of different parts of the body. Some bits are different. Men tend to be bigger in stature than women on average, more muscular on average. Other bits of the body are the same. So it's not just elephants that do this. And the answer to any question in biology is if something looks a certain way that it does, then that's because it's been selected for as a trait or a characteristic over evolutionary time. And the selection pressure will be something in the environment that gives you a particular advantage to doing something. Because making big tusks is hugely energy dependent. That's going to come at a cost to you, to your body, to grow that tissue. Therefore, you've got to eat more to do it. Therefore, there's got to be a return. Nature wants a return on its investment. So if you have a characteristic in an animal then there must be an advantage conferred upon you that makes you more successful in the environment you live in to have that trait and for that trait to be maintained. If it ceases to confer an advantage, over time, it will slowly be selected out. You'll lose that thing because it doesn't confer any kind of advantage to you anymore. So if you see any difference in an animal and you ask, why does this one have this and this one doesn't? The answer is that one that has that thing must use it for some reason, because it's use it or lose it, and it must confer an advantage beyond the cost of actually investing in making it. So I don't know precisely why there might be a difference in the shape of an elephant's ears in one continent compared to another, the tusk shape and structure or presence or not, but I can argue there will be some evolutionary advantage that means that this particular group did better because they had a trait or because they didn't have a trait because they weren't spending the energy on it.
Dr. Chris Smith, last month I went on a roller coaster. I was fine, but the person next to me passed out for a few seconds and then came back just to pass out again for a few seconds. Why did it happen to him?
Well, there's a few reasons why this can happen. Number one is roller coasters are an exhilarating experience, and in some people that exhilaration is accompanied by a huge surge in adrenaline, and sometimes this can make people's heart go so fast that their heart actually stops beating effectively. That's a rare outcome and hopefully doesn't happen frequently on a roller coaster, but it's certainly possible. The other possibility is that we become completely overwhelmed by the emotion and the excitement, and that has a similar effect. It affects the cardiac output, the ability of the heart to supply enough blood to keep our brain supplied and keep us conscious. The other possibility is that the roller coaster itself, the way we're moving and being thrown around, is affecting how much blood is making its way back to the heart, and that in turn affects cardiac output, which affects the ability to keep the brain supplied with enough blood to keep you conscious. This latter effect is the most likely one, and some people are just more prone to what we call postural hypotension, which is where when you have a certain position of the body, you can't compensate quickly enough or adequately to keep blood flowing back from the dependent parts of your body, such as your feet, which are a long way from your heart, in order to maintain satisfactory cardiac output. You often find this if you have a hot bath and then stand up quickly. You might feel a bit woozy or see flashing lights in front of your eyes transiently. It's exactly the same effect. Fighter pilots pulling lots of Gs at very high speed in an aircraft also have the same problem. In fact, they wear special suits which are inflated by compressed air that come from the jet engines to squeeze their legs when they take certain manoeuvres to keep the blood flowing back to their brain so they don't end up passing out in this way. So a number of different possibilities. The most common one is going to be that there's hypotension going on owing to the fact that that person's not compensating as well as the person who wasn't passing out for all the Gs that they're going through on their roller coaster ride.
And the next question comes from Norman in Ocean View. It comes with two pleases, please, please. And it's on the same topic, interestingly. Please ask the naked scientist any cure for dizziness. I'm sometimes scared to walk in case I fall. Please, please. Norman.
Well, Norman, just what we were saying on the last answer, that if a person becomes dizzier as they get older, this is quite common. And this is postural hypotension. And we see lots of elderly people who end up in hospital because they stand up too quickly from their armchair, for example, and the blood gets left behind transiently in their feet. This drops their cardiac output, they feel dizzy, and then they fall forward and go splat. So the other thing that could be considered is some people go on to drugs for high blood pressure, antihypertensives, and this can blunt your ability to compensate for a sudden drop in postural tone in that way, and that can also cause exactly the same thing. The other reason why this can happen is that, as I say, some people have underlying heart rhythm disturbances, which when you exercise can suddenly kick in, and that can affect the ability of the heart to efficiently push enough blood up to your brain. So if this is a new thing, if this has started happening all of a sudden, this needs investigating because it could be something like that. If it coincides with, say, starting to take a certain drug, such as an antihypertensive, that might need the levels tweaking or even changing drugs to one that works with a different mechanism of action to minimise the effect. Because what doctors definitely don't want to do is to treat someone for high blood pressure for a theoretical risk that there's a problem because of high blood pressure and substitute a very real risk of falling over and injuring yourself because of over-aggressive high blood pressure treatment. So that needs looking at. The other possibility is that on a hot day, when a person's been very active, got very hot, the body diverts huge amounts of blood to your skin to enable you to lose heat via conduction and radiation off of your skin. And also you sweat a lot. This reduces your circulating volume, which can compromise your ability to maintain adequate blood flow to your brain when you then start exercising harder on top of that. So all these things all may factor. So it'll range from things that have happened all your life and are trivial to things that might be new, started to happen. You can attribute a cause, but they definitely need looking into and some possible investigations and different management.
It's Friday, our time with the Naked Scientist. You can send your questions via WhatsApp on 072-567-1567. Better still, give us a call. We'll prioritize that call on 021-446-0567. Jane writes, it's Mary actually. Morning, can your cerebellum recover if you stop drinking? On the 6th percentile now, cognitive function fine.
The cerebellum is the part of the brain at the back of your head. It's called cerebellum because that's Latin for small brain. And there's an object, is about the size of your bunched up fist, which sits below the brain proper at the back and has a very interesting shape and structure because it's lots of little so-called folia or leaves. This part of the brain is very tightly bound up with movement, and although not exclusively related to movement, there are some other functions in there as well. Balance and movement are very heavily processed and influenced through this part of the brain. If a person drinks very heavily, it can affect a range of different parts of the brain, but the cerebellum can be affected. And sometimes this is because of an acute effect of alcohol. When you drink, alcohol has, as you know, a giddying or dizzying effect on the brain in the short term. When that goes away, though, in people who've done this chronically, it can cause degeneration of nerve cells in different parts of the brain, and that is likely to be less reversible. There will be some ability to compensate, there will be some recovery after a person stops drinking, and there can also be some compensation because one of the aspects of what the brain does is to rewire itself to achieve the best possible outcome with what it's got to work with. And so there will be some rehabilitation in the aftermath or some compensation in the aftermath of stopping drinking. But the problem with the central nervous system is that you only have one brain and it can't grow another one. And although there is some limited cell reproduction and regeneration in the brain, to the most extent, there's no recovery from injuries like strokes, trauma, or chemical damage from chronic alcohol abuse. So the number one thing is to optimize health in all other respects, stop all other insults to the nervous system, like bad diet, like smoking, optimize things like high blood pressure, any diabetes, and absolutely do not drink anymore. But don't just suddenly stop drinking. If a person's been a heavy drinker, don't stop all of a sudden. Do this with help and support, because alcohol is one of the few drugs which, if you stop it, having been dependent upon it, you can actually die. No other drug, really, if you stop it suddenly, is going to do you major harm and kill you. Alcohol can, because people go into status epilepticus. They start fitting if you suddenly stop drinking after a career of very heavy drinking, and it can be life-threatening. So it's really important that a person doesn't just stop drinking if they've been heavily dependent all of a sudden. They need to do this with help, support, monitoring, and make sure that the vitamins that people are often deficient in have been replaced as well.
Please ask the Naked Scientist why the prescribed dose of medicine is double for dogs compared to humans. For example, my dog was prescribed Valium at a dose that was double what a human equivalent weight would take. And that's from Madeline.
Hello, Madeline. Well, dogs are obviously not humans, and their metabolism is quite different to ours. We know, for instance, if I go and grab a chocolate bar, I can eat it with impunity. It wouldn't be good for my waistline if I did that a lot, but it wouldn't do any harm to me in the long term, other than making me gain weight and have a sugar rush. I could kill a dog that way, because dogs cannot metabolize the chemical which is in chocolate, theobromine, which becomes a toxin for the dog. So therefore, there's a difference in how we metabolize things and how dogs metabolize things. Laboratory mice are exactly the same. There are things that we could do with a mouse that you absolutely couldn't do with a human, and vice versa. So this is why we worry that when we test medicines on things other than humans, there is always a concern that their metabolism or their response to that drug may be different. And that's why it's important, having approved that something's safe or tested something initially in an animal, you would then test it on a human or cells in a dish as well, to make sure that the cells are actually an accurate representation, or the response is an accurate representation of what that drug really does. So in answer to the question about specific drugs, dogs are going to have different receptors in their brains and nervous system for drugs like Valium, which target the nervous system. They're going to have different rates of metabolism of that drug, and they may also have different rates at which they absorb the drug in the first place, because dog physiology for the way they absorb and distribute chemicals around their body is going to be different. And when you bring all those factors together, the effective dose, the duration of the effective dose, and how hard it therefore impacts on its target is going to be quite different in one animal species compared to another, potentially.
Okay, we've got one in from Stuart. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Clarence. Stuart from Deep River here. On the animals enjoying beaches and that kind of stuff, it's something that might be worth looking up, but apparently there have been reported sightings of bears, particularly in the States and North America, going out of the way to climb up cliffs and big rocks, apparently to enjoy sunsets. So yeah, just something that might be worth checking out.
They might be enjoying the view, but then you have to be sceptical and say, well, on the other hand, if the sun's going down, the temperature's going down, they might be going up there to get the last vestiges of the warmth of the day. They might be going up there to get a good view using the last light, because obviously the higher you go, the longer you can see, because the light lasts longer at greater altitude, because the sun horizon is brought back into view. So they might be looking for danger, they might be looking for food. On the other hand, they might just be enjoying the view. Stuart's right. So we don't know for sure, but you have to be really careful. You take all those different factors into account when you consider whether an animal is doing something because it serves its purpose and makes that animal more successful, or whether it's doing it for fun. I watched an amazing video a few years ago of a corvid, a member of the crow family, sliding down a roof on a paint tin in the snow. And it didn't do it once, it did it multiple times. It would slide down on the snow like a toboggan, pick up the thing, go back up to the top of the roof, put it down, jump on it like a bobsleigh runner, and it did it multiple times. Now, why would it do that unless it was doing it either because it was inquisitive about the effect, it wanted to understand the physics of friction, maybe it did, maybe it was a feathered Einstein, as some people dub these birds, or maybe it was just having fun. I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, we play, and when kids play with adults, often they play things like tickle games. Now, why do we tickle our kids and chase them around? What are we doing that for? Why do we find that fun? Well, the answer is we're actually learning evasion strategies when we do that. Your tickly bits are also where your most vulnerable bits are. And by making it into a game, it teaches you, A, where your vulnerable bits are, and B, how to get out of the way and keep them hidden and keep them out of other people's reaches, which is a protective thing. So fun is actually a protective thing in later life. Dogs do exactly the same thing. I mean, I've got a couple of dogs. They fight, in inverted commas, with each other all the time. The big one, who's the dad to the small one, she is being beaten up by him and rolled over by him and chased by him all the time. And what he's effectively doing is teaching her how to look out for herself, isn't he? But they do it and they're having fun doing it. And so I think nature is giving some reward for learning an important lesson.
Did psilocybin, did magic mushrooms play any role in the evolution of humans?
Well, certainly there's a long history of chemicals which and use and exposure to chemicals which have hallucinogenic effects. Psilocybin is one such hallucinogen. There are other chemicals which are known to be produced in nature by a range of different sources, which humans ancestrally, culturally, have used. And they produced mind-bending and mind-altering effects, and they are written into folklore. So you could argue, well, this is almost certainly contributed to cultural history, behaviour, and how different human groups have gone about what they do. So I would say, yes, there is evidence that these things have affected our evolution, because they've affected how cultures and groups have behaved over many, many generations.
And then we've got a question from Anne. Is a heart murmur a side effect of an overactive thyroid?
Well, it can be. A heart murmur, what the word actually means, when we put a stethoscope on someone's chest and listen over the heart, you can hear the heart going lubbed up as it opens and closes different valves and squirts blood out. But you then hear additional sounds between those opening and closing sounds, which are blood flowing. And if a valve, which is an opening that can be open or closed, is narrowed or leaky, you get a rushing sound because the blood is either being pushed back the wrong way when the heart beats against a closed valve and the blood is going the wrong way, and it makes a harsh kind of noise. You also sometimes can hear, when you should be hearing complete silence, you hear a squirting noise because a valve is leaking. So a murmur is turbulent blood flow indicative of either a restricted flow or flow in the wrong direction at the wrong time. And a cardiologist can hear all this and they'll know exactly what valve is affected. Now, with a thyroid problem, thyroid glands in your neck produce the hormone thyroxine, which sets your metabolism. And as you develop an overactive thyroid, this can drive up heart rate and also blood pressure. And if you have a heart that's going too fast, you can actually develop what we call a flow murmur, because as the output of the heart goes up very, very high, it starts to force more blood out through these valves than the valves can take. And you begin to get turbulent blood flow, not because there's a problem with the valve, but because the heart is working really hard. So you can get a flow murmur with high output cardiac failure. Yes, and there are other murmurs that could be disclosed as the heart tries to work harder because it's being driven by the thyroxine signal harder than it normally can. You may disclose other underlying heart problems as well, giving other murmurs a chance to rear their ugly heads. So the answer is yes, you absolutely could, because of high thyroid function, get heart murmurs.
A big thank you to the Naked Scientist. Of course, you can get him. Just give us that website address. Is it nakedscientist.com?
Yes, so what we do after this program finishes, each week we will take the audio from, or we do take the audio from this program, and we clean it up a little bit to make it as tight as possible. And then we put it as a podcast, and you go to nakedscientist.com/ask, ASK, because that's where we corral together just these phone-ins with you and me. And you can get that at nakedscientist.com/ask, or you go on to where you get podcasts and you just look up Ask the Naked Scientist.